the first notes of the chorus from Nabucco, my father would get excited. Verdi and Caruso were his idols. He had a huge collection of records, and he listened to Caruso's on an old gramophone from the early 1900s. He never lost an opportunity to lecture me on opera.
This was one of the first musical compositions written by Verdi that was not an immediate success, but it later became almost our national anthem. Tony, I'm afraid you don't listen to your father when he talks about these things. For instance, did you know that La Scala in Milan is named after a church that once stood on the spot called Santa Maria della Scala? You should see the design of the original curtain. It was a real work of art. The theater opened in 1778, and the La Scala Theatrical Museum is located next to the theater, under the portico. If you ever visit it, you'll understand why your father loves opera so much. The museum contains an historical collection of theatrical mementos. One day you'll visit it, and I'll be your guide.
Ciao, Luisa. The meeting was longer than expected, and I missed the plane. The next flight's this evening at 8 o'clock. I'll head for home as soon as I arrive in New York. I've already decided how I'll pass the time. I'm going to the La Scala Theatrical Museum. I passed by it, and so... Yes, I know. I thought the same thing. Papa would be really surprised. Yes. My love to you and Paola. I'll see you tomorrow. Ciao.
A group has just begun a Gadi too. You can join them.
Thanks, but I prefer to look around by myself.
As you like, sir.
The La Scala Theatrical Museum is one of the most important of its kind in Europe. Its collection of mementos, paintings, sculptures, miniatures, autographs, ceramics, porcelain, set designs, posters, and engravings fully document the history of the theater, from ancient times to the present, including classical theater, opera, and ballet. The Livia Simoni Library, connected with the museum, is one of the most important theatrical libraries in the world. The La Scala Museum began with a subscription sponsored by the Italian royal family, the aristocracy, and Milanese businessmen. It was inaugurated on March 8, 1913, with a gala evening featuring the opera Le Donne Curiose by Wolf Ferrari and the ballet Siama.
In the first room, we find the composers of the so-called Verismo realistic school: Puccini, Mascagni, Leoncavallo, Giordano, and Boito. I find their music deeply moving. These composers followed the great 19th century period of Italian melodrama. In their search for new means of expression, they abandoned heroic tales set in faraway places and times. They invented verismo by writing about normal human events and composing beautiful music around the occurrences of everyday life. Or they adopted historical themes like Giordano in Andrea Chenier, which takes place during the French Revolution. There were no more castles and princes, just love affairs and sufferings of common people. A Sicilian farmer leaves his fiancée for another man's wife. A clown's heart is torn by jealousy. Listen to Caruso. You heard Gigli on the tape recorder, but Caruso must be heard on this gramophone because when he recorded the disc, it could only be heard on this machine. It's not just a question of loyalty. It gives you a true idea of a voice not enhanced by electronic tricks and all that other modern witchcraft.
After the disastrous opening of Madame Butterfly at La Scala, with Rosina Storchio singing the lead, Puccini punished the Milanese public by never again allowing the opera to be performed in that theater during his lifetime. It was Toscanini who brought Butterfly successfully to La Scala, but only after Puccini's death in 1924. Rosetta Pampanini contributed enormously to the opera's success and became the best-known interpreter of Puccini's passionate heroine. A collection of medallions honoring her is in the first room next to the case with Toscanini's memorabilia. The plaster cast of Toscanini's hands is next to that of another great conductor, Victor de Sabata, who was active at La Scala after Toscanini left the theater following a political disagreement. Beside them is Niccolò Paganini, the composer and violin virtuoso. The bust of Wagner is a copy of the original by Lorenz von Gedon, and that of Beethoven is a copy of the original by Dietrich, now in Vienna. The busts of the famous tenors Francesco Merli, Aureliano Pertile, Enrico Caruso, and Beniamino Gigli are found in the second room, where, next to a showcase holding rare ceramics, is the portrait of the soprano Maria Callas, painted by Ulisse Sartini. This is Giuseppe Piermarini, the architect of La Scala. Next, we have a painting by Angelo Inganni, painted in 1853, which depicts La Scala as it was in the days of Rossini, Bellini, Donizetti, and the young Verdi. The opera house was badly damaged by bombs during World War II. Describing the bombardment of La Scala, Giampiero Tintori wrote, "As I walked down Via Marino, I suddenly saw La Scala with its roof caved in. Even though I was only a little more than 20 at the time, I had been going to La Scala for many years, and it was my heart, my life, the place where I first heard and learned to love music." Rebuilt after the war, La Scala reopened to the public on May 11th, 1946, with a memorable evening that also marked the return of Arturo Toscanini from political exile. Next to the painting of La Scala is a portrait of Alessandro Rolla, the famous violin and viola player, who was an important musical figure in 19th century Milan. The police forbade him to play his viola in public because it made women swoon. These two paintings depicting theatrical life in the 18th century are by Giuseppe di Albertis. It's interesting to note that the orchestra was placed in 2 rows facing each other with the conductor at the harpsichord. This is the Sala dell'Esedra. The center showcase contains a valuable collection of miniatures and other objects pertaining to the world of the theater. This miniature portrait of the soprano Giuseppina Grassini was commissioned by Napoleon Bonaparte. Grassini, Napoleon's mistress, did not hesitate to accept the favors of the Duke of Wellington when the French emperor lost his power. Here we have Giovanni Battista Rubini, the first great tenor after the decline of the castrati. This portrait of Vincenzo Bellini was given by the composer to Giuditta Pasta, the most famous interpreter of his works. She's a very important figure in the history of opera. Of rare intelligence and extraordinary stage presence, Pasta sang throughout Europe and Russia to continual ovations. Her great friend and rival, Maria Malibran, beautiful and intelligent, she possessed the voice and sensitivity of a great artist. Her life was short and passionate. Her family, the Garcias, organized the first opera company to tour the United States. It was there that the young Marietta married Malibran, a failed banker. When she realized she'd been exploited, she left her husband and returned to Europe. Here she is as Desdemona in Otello by Gioacchino Rossini. Back in Europe, she fell in love with the violinist Charles de Berriot, whom she married shortly before she died at 28 after falling from a horse. The painter Pedrazzi executed this portrait of Malibran when her relationship with de Berriot had not become legal, and the singer's secret love affair is concealed in the initials of the names of the flowers, Camellia, Acanthus, Rose, Lilac, and Oleifragrans, forming the name Carlo, Charles. This caricature in terracotta of Enrico Caruso is by the tenor himself. A valuable collection of ceramics depicting theatrical celebrities brings us to the Commedia dell'arte room. The engravings of Jacques Callot inspired the authors of these paintings. They represent the masks which spread Italian theater throughout Europe in the 17th century. We find Lucia in Trastullo, Rosalba in Florindo, Captain Babbeo in Cucuba, Captain Sparamonti, Bagattino, Captain Bombardone and Captain Grillo, Brighella, Harlequin, the Doctor and Pantalone. Here we have Raimondo Poisson, the actor known as Belroche. Tiberio Fiorello, known as Scaramouche, was renowned in France and inspired Molière. Known as Dominique, Giuseppe Biancolelli was a favorite of the Sun King and the most famous harlequin of all time. Carlo Goldoni was always fascinated by the world of the theater. Here he's shown during his famous journey on the Brenta River with a company of actors. The next room is dedicated to Rossini. These are some of Rossini's mementos. This pair of glasses belonged to the composer. This showcase houses a plaster cast of one of Chopin's hands. On the walls are medallions with bas-reliefs of famous singers. The bass Luigi Lablache, a friend of Stendhal, enjoyed enormous success throughout Europe. He was Rossini's favorite singer and sang Mozart's Requiem at Beethoven's funeral. This unfinished portrait by Ambrogio Alciati is of Rosina Storchio, the original Madame Butterfly in the opera's ill-fated first performance. She later sang the role triumphantly all over the world. Donizetti's story is a sad one. Committed to a rest home in his old age where he was kept in total isolation, generous friends finally took him back to his native Bergamo, where he died in the home of the Bazzoni family. Giovanni Paisiello was the last important exponent of sophisticated Neapolitan comic opera. In 1776, he was invited to St. Petersburg by Empress Catherine II, and there his Barber of Seville was first performed, predating Rossini's immensely successful opera of the same name. On the score is written Il mio ben quando verrà, the first words of the famous aria from the opera Nina pazza per amore. This aria was enormously popular in its day, and when first sung in the belvedere of the royal palace in Caserta, the public was so moved that it began to loudly console Nina, who was sung by Celeste Coltellini. The archaeological section preserves historical editions of tragedy, satire, old comedy, the comedies of Magna Grecia, and new comedy. This section also contains an imposing collection of images of gladiators, wrestlers, dancers, and contortionists. There are also about 200 ancient Roman oil lamps with depictions of musicians, masks, and acrobats. The most prized collection is of ancient coins with an emperor's portrait on one side, his name surrounding it, and a theatrical scene on the other side. Vases dating from 350 BC show theatrical representations. In this coitile with red figures, two women offer a plate of sweets and a floral wreath. On the other side is a small stage with Hercules, Alcestis, and Hermes reciting. This small vase depicts a dance master teaching a student. The teacher is holding the stick that dance masters used up until the last century. One of those dance masters was Enrico Cecchetti, who had once been a famous dancer. He taught his art throughout Europe, Anna Pavlova being one of his students. His feared stick is preserved in the room dedicated to costumes and the dance.
Verdi was one of Italy's greatest opera composers. Like Rossini, Donizetti, and Bellini before him, he became one of the great poets of human passion.
Verdi's first wife, Margherita, and his father-in-law, Antonio Barezzi, who assisted young Verdi in his musical education. But tragedy soon struck the family with the death of their two children and Margherita. Bartolomeo Merelli played an important role in Verdi's artistic life. He was one of the most important impresarios of the 19th century, and besides La Scala, he worked with theaters in Vienna, London, and St. Petersburg. After the triumph of Verdi's Oberto, Count of Bonifacio, he ensured the success of Nabucco and I Lombardi alla Prima Crociata. Their alliance ended in 1845, and Verdi did not give the first performance of an opera at La Scala until 1887 with Otello. Giuseppina Strepponi, Verdi's second wife, was the original interpreter of Nabucco. In this showcase are exhibited gifts, personal objects, and works composed by Verdi in his youth. Felice Varesi, the original interpreter of Rigoletto. The autographed score of Verdi's Requiem with its dedication to Teresa Stolz. To Teresa Stolz, the first interpreter of this composition. These drawings by Lodovico Pogliani and Adolf Hohenstein document Verdi's dying moments, which the two painters sought to immortalize.
Verdi's life was truly a miracle, Tony. He was born into humble surroundings, a small town in the Emilia region. It was one of those towns that are suffocated by fog in the winter. One of those places where, when the sun finally arrives in spring, you get the feeling it was stolen. He was born poor, the son of a poor grocer who couldn't read or write. Wagner was born in the same year, 1813, but in completely different circumstances. Young Verdi, who was refused admission to the conservatory in Milan, was almost entirely self-taught. At the age of 30, he had already written Ernani. A few years later, his immortality was assured with Rigoletto, which burst upon Venice like a bomb. La Traviata was another immense success. A performance of Ballo in Maschera before the German emperor was also a memorable occasion.
Verdi wasn't present at the first performance of Aida in Cairo on Christmas night, 1871. He strongly disliked sea travel, and even the offer of a sizable amount of money couldn't persuade him. Perhaps that night he wrote a letter in his hotel in Milan. The last writing table he used in that hotel is now one of the most treasured pieces in the museum. There are also busts of Giuseppina Strepponi and Verdi, both by the sculptor Vincenzo Gemito. Aida was performed at La Scala a few weeks after its debut in Cairo, and Verdi scored another triumphant success. The public went wild, waving handkerchiefs and throwing flowers at the composer's feet. Verdi felt that he was once again the poet of his people, the way he was when his music had incited the masses during their struggle for a new Italy. The 5 letters of his name took on a new significance: Vittorio Emanuele, Re d'Italia, Victor Emmanuel, King of Italy, and it became the battle cry of an entire generation. Verdi's music and his name came to symbolize Italy. Verdi was 81 when he composed Falstaff. The world was amazed by the youthful vigor of the only opera buffa written by the composer. It was to be the last marvelous work in a life full of drama and torment. The baritone, Victor Maurel, the splendid protagonist of the first performance of Falstaff, along with his fellow cast members. By now, time had dispersed the clouds from Verdi's life. He had attained the ultimate philosophical attitude, a smile. Given at La Scala on February 9th, 1893, the opera was greeted with indescribable frenzy on the part of the public. For Verdi, Falstaff signified a great adventure of the spirit, the discovery of the indulgent side of his character, of his talent for humor and tolerance. The last notes of Falstaff. Everything is over. Go, go, old John. Go on down the road as long as you can, you amusing rascal. Eternally sincere, with a different mask for every new time and place. Go, go. Go on, go on. Goodbye. That's the way the composer took leave of his main character.
Giuseppe Verdi wrote, "I order that my funeral be very modest and take place at sunrise or at the Angelus in the evening, without songs or sounds. 2 priests and a cross will be enough." The interpreters of his works were spiritually present. Through his music, Verdi spoke to the hearts of men. And this is a real miracle, Tony, because when it happens, men forget everything else and are happy. But you and I have never agreed on this matter because you think that what counts in life is to work hard and build a career and that everything else is nonsense. You even refuse to understand Paula, who has the same spirit as her grandfather. She certainly looks like me, and she also has a beautiful voice. If she studied seriously, she could become an excellent singer. Who knows? Perhaps another Giuseppina Strepponi.
This little bronze statue of the great tragic actress Adelaide Ristori greets us in the room dedicated to actors. Tommaso Salvini was the most famous actor of his day. A renowned interpreter of Shakespeare, he was instrumental in making the Italians aware of the genius of the English dramatist. Eleonora Duse characterized an epic with her life both on stage and off, including love affairs with Boito and Gabriele D'Annunzio. D'Annunzio declared that she suffered and loved for everyone. No words could better describe her artistry. The Livia Simoni Theatrical Library is one of the most important in the world. It resulted from a bequest of 54,000 volumes by the playwright and critic Renato Simoni. The gift comprises 365 editions from the 16th century, 400 from the 17th century, and numerous others from the 18th century. The comedies of Plautus, printed in Venice by Lazzaro Suardo in 1511. Among the 17th century editions are the works of Carlo Goldoni. An autographed letter by him is also preserved in the archives of the library. A note autographed by Manzoni and addressed to Verdi. A letter by Beethoven. A note from Verdi addressed to Giuseppina Strepponi. Another note by Verdi addressed to Boito, announcing the completion of Falstaff. The archives contain a collection of 22,000 letters by theatrical personalities and more than 1,000 sketches and set designs dating back to the 16th century. The library and archives are like an enormous treasure chest, an historical memorial to the art of the theater.
Signore. Signore,
Yes?
it's almost closing time.
It is? I didn't realize it was so late.
Have you ever visited the museum before?
No, but I'm coming back with my daughter. She loves opera, and she's studying singing.
Maybe someday she'll debut at La Scala.
At La Scala. Who knows? That's certainly what her dream is.